And demons shall meet with goblins. The satyr shall cry to his fellow. Ah, there Lilith settles and finds for herself a resting place. Hello everyone, this is Gilgamesh, and we're starting into the second half of Isaiah here with chapter 34. And chapters 34 and 35 kind of go together. They form the last two chapters of Isaiah's first section. After this, we're going to go into sort of a historical interlude. But here in this section, we have these two contrasting chapters. And they go together not because of their similarities, but because of their contrast with each other. This chapter, we're going to talk about some serious destruction and doom. And the chapter after that, we're going to reverse it, and we're going to talk about the blessings that are prepared for Zion. But this chapter is maybe the most brutal in Isaiah, so strap in. We're going to get kind of gory on this one. But let's kick it off here. Verse 1. We start with an interesting introduction here. It kind of reminds us of the beginning of Isaiah. Draw near, O nations, to hear, and give attention, O peoples. Let the earth hear, and all that fills her, the world, and all that comes from her. Well, beautiful introduction there, just gathering the attention for everybody to come around and hear what the prophet's message is. Now, this word, all that comes from her, tzetzayim, is another fun Isaiah word with this repeated syllable that he likes to do. It's used by Isaiah twice, here and in chapter 42, verse 5. And it's also used once in Job 31:8. That's the only time it really appears. It comes from the word that means to go forth, but this is an unusual Hebrew verb stem that is not one of the 7 common ones. And Isaiah loves this strange verb stem with its repeated syllable. He uses it frequently. And I will note this is a word that is used traditionally in what is both considered first and second Isaiah. But fun word there of all of it comes forth from her, all her offspring, all those that issue forth from the earth. So this message is very broad. It is intended for the entire world and to all the nations of the earth. And so what does it say here? For the Lord is enraged against all the nations and furious against all their host. He has devoted them to destruction. He has given them over for slaughter. Does not sound good. The Lord here is enraged at all of the nations. It doesn't mention at this point a specific national target of the divine wrath. That's going to come later around verse 5. This initial perspective, though, is just global. It's everyone. For that matter, when it does get down to specifics in verse 5, I'm not sure how specific it's really intended to be, or if the nation that's mentioned is simply a stand-in. This is really for everyone who has fought against Zion. Seems to be what this chapter is about. But this is apocalyptic in nature. All the earth is summoned to listen to this dire prophecy and the devastating judgment that's going to sweep across the whole world. Isaiah is considered earlier than most apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic literature being literature about the end of the world. That's a very arbitrary decision. Some would classify his stuff as proto-apocalyptic, and that true apocalyptic literature doesn't happen until like the time of the book of Daniel. I'm not sure how much I stand behind that distinction. Isaiah really seems apocalyptic, especially in this chapter. But he is talking about a final status of the end of the world here. Now we say devoting to destruction. This is something that we could spend a long time on. It is a he feel of the verb haram. This is a specialized verb. It means something beyond redemption, something to be utterly destroyed. But it also isn't that simple. It's from this word that we get the Arabic word haram, indicating something that is sacred and protected, and the protected status of wives. And then on the contrast of that, the Akkadian word indicates prostitute. So it's got a range. Making it more interesting, it can also mean a dragnet, indicating capture. And it's used twice in this chapter, and Robert Alter seems to favor the meaning of being caught in this net rather than devoted to destruction. However, the context is quite clear here that whether it is because they are caught in a net or simply marked in some way for destruction, they are going to die. The word right after the about slaughter is unambiguous. This, again, might be the most brutal chapter in Isaiah. So we talk here about they're going to be slaughtered, and we make it even clearer in verse 3. Their slain shall be cast out, and the stench of their corpses shall rise. The mountains shall melt with their blood, and the valleys shall split open. Okay, so we have the idea of the slain being just tossed out, and it's going to smell terrible. The word for stench here is a rather rare one that only occurs 3 times as a noun. It occurs a bit more as a verb. But all 3 times it occurs as a noun, it is talking about the stench of corpses. And generally corpses that are corpses because of the judgment of God. So this seems to be a very specific thing of the smell of dead bodies. That this is going to rise up from their corpses as they're thrown out. So we have the idea of massive death, people laying out exposed to the elements, and just the horrible smell of that. And the mountains are going to melt from their blood. Some translations go with to be drenched or to flow with their blood, but the Hebrew word literally means to melt, and it's kind of worth preserving that hyperbole, that this tide of blood is going to be so much blood it's actually going to dissolve the mountains. So we're talking about a terribly gory, horrifying time here that death will be everywhere. We have this additional phrase here, and the valleys shall split open. You won't find that in many translations because it's not in the Masoretic Text. This line was lost, and it is restored to us through the great Isaiah scroll in the Dead Sea Scrolls. There was another line here, that the mountains shall melt with their blood, and the valleys shall split open. But that final line in this verse got lost over time. But because we have found the Dead Sea Scrolls, it is now returned to its place. Some translations will insert it there, but most of your traditional ones will not have access to it because it got lost from the traditional text. Going to verse 4. All the hosts of heaven shall rot away, and the skies roll up like a scroll. And their host shall wither as leaves wither from the vine, like leaves withering from the fig tree. So we got the idea that the hosts of heaven, these are the stars in the sky, they are going to rot and wither. And this is crazy because they're beyond anything that the earth could have as its temporal nature. They're looked at as being the very essence of eternal. And there are those in the northern sky that never set. And so the stars withering, that's incredibly disturbing imagery here for the things that are thought of as being beyond the human realm, that represent the realm of God, that those things are going to rot and wither the same way that a plant would. That this destruction then goes beyond being just a destruction that is earthly, but one that reaches all the way to the cosmos. And we have here the idea that they will, the hosts will wither or fall. Maybe a play on words here. The word that's translated as wither or fall is also a homonym to a word that means foolish. And it may be playing very subtly here that this is the fate of those that have chosen poorly, that are unwise. And we have the strong agricultural metaphor. We go from the skies and rolling up like a scroll, which is also interesting because scrolls, this is how they wrote even back in Isaiah's time, and they would roll them up, and this meets what we found in Qumran, although we don't have any real scrolls from the time of Isaiah. It's clear that they used such writing materials back then. But we have the idea of the very sky rolling up like a scroll. And the sky was thought of as being this hard, permanent thing. Even the word firmament is because it was firm. It was something that was like beaten out of metal or something. And so it's just going to roll up like a scroll. And we have the idea of withering here. This word for withering might mean foolish as well. And so there's this play on words that's happening here. And we bring it from the skies back down to agriculture, where their staple crops, the vine and the fig tree, are going to be withered as well. So this destruction is all encompassing. And it gets worse. Verse 5. For my sword is drenched in the heavens. Behold, upon Edom she shall fall, and upon the people of my devoting to destruction for justice. And yes, that last line is a little cumbersome there. I wanted to kind of reflect how the Hebrew looks in there. This is an unusual phrase here. My sword is drenched in the heavens. Some translations will say my sword is bathed in the heavens. It's an odd phrase. What does bathing a sword in the heavens mean? Well, the Hebrew word here is changed in the Isaiah scroll as well to a word that means to appear or be seen. My sword is seen in the heavens. That's an interesting change. And the idea that his sword is appearing in the heavens as a sign. The Septuagint actually helps here a bit with the idea that this may be to drink its fill. And drenched is kind of a halfway there in that translation. But the idea is that it has drunk its fill with the blood of the people here. Now, I tend to think that drinking is the right metaphor here, because swords are often depicted as eating. When they kill people, they are devoured by the sword. That somewhat obscures it in English when we say that something is consumed by the sword or devoured by the sword. The Hebrew literally says, is eaten by the sword. And that's how they thought of swords in general. So the idea that the sword has drunk does fit along with that same imagery. It is a unique phrase, and really only used here. But my money is on that this is meaning that my sword has drunk all it can in the heavens, referring to the blood that has been spilled. And then we have here the appearance of Edom. Edom, as the hated archenemy that is going to be devastated by divine wrath, some would put that as a late date for this prophecy. Edom notoriously collaborated with the Babylonian invaders in 586 BCE. Psalm 137 recalls this very vividly. Is that what this is referring to? It's impossible to say. It was certainly not the first or only negative interaction they had with Edom. And it may be that, just as happened with the Babylonians, that the Israelites expected Edom to come to their aid, and they did not. Edom is portrayed in Scripture as a cousin of Israel. And while that is a tense relationship, and it is portrayed as such, Edom is considered a close relative and would be expected to be on Israel's side as a foreign invader comes in. But here it is put out as the subject of complete destruction. Now, doomed to destruction, this again, there is a homonym here that means net or dragnet. Robert Alter prefers this phrasing here, that he believes it could mean something along the lines of the people caught in my net for judgment. And that does make sense. Either way, they're getting killed. So, I mean, it's not that big of a distinction. But rather than it being the word which means to devote something to destruction, that it could mean that the people that are caught in the net for slaughter and caught in the net to be brought before justice. And that may be the sense of how this word is actually being used here. So that's a defensible translation. Moving on to verse 6. The sword is the Lord's. It is filled with blood. It is engorged with fat. with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams. For the Lord has a sacrifice in Bozrah, a great slaughter in the land of Edom. So, a lot of interesting statements here. We're clearly talking about sacrificial animals, and his sword is filled, engorged with blood and fat, and this refers to the blood and fat of animals. We have now conflated humans being slaughtered with animals being taken in for ceremonial sacrifice. And so the people here are like animals that are being offered as sacrifice. Now, Joseph Blenkinsop, one of the great commentators on Isaiah, he notes that there is a poetic play on words here between the two Hebrew terms tzeva and teva. Teva is the same word we had back in verse 2 for slaughtered. Zeva is the word for to offer something as a sacrifice. And so it says there is a sacrifice in Bozrah and a slaughter in Edom. Bozrah is one of the prominent Edomite cities, that's sort of its capital. And so these are both referring to the same place, the same people. But he's saying that there is a sacrifice and a slaughter. And so the people are being treated as though they are sacrificial animals. They are just being slaughtered. And the sword of the Lord, the sword belongs to the Lord, we're told. It is filled with blood and fat being the most choice part of the sacrifice. And the people here are being offered as sacrifices to appease the Lord as he brings forth this great justice on them. And we continue with the idea here of animals for sacrifice. Wild oxen shall fall with them, and young steers with the mighty bulls. Their land shall drink its fill of blood, and their soil shall be engorged with fat. We have here the land will drink its fill. This is the exact same word that we used back in verse 5 to describe the sword. So it does seem like drink fits well in both places. Their land is going to drink its fill of the blood of its people, and their soil is going to be engorged with fat. Same word engorged that was used referencing the sword. So, yes, it sounds like the people are going to die. They're going to die in massive amounts at levels that are hard to comprehend. There will be so much blood it will dissolve the mountains. That this is just trying to portray this idea of a horrific scene of violence and bloodshed. And why is it happening? Verse 8. For the day of vengeance is the Lord's, a year of restitution for the case of Zion. And the streams of Edom shall be turned into pitch, and her soil into sulfur, and her land shall become burning pitch. Okay, so we have here the day of the Lord, the day of vengeance is the Lord's. It actually parallels the structure very much of verse 6 where it said the sword is the Lord's. Now it's saying the day of vengeance is the Lord's. And as is typical in Hebrew parallelism, you intensify on the next line when you have two lines that are parallel. So we have here a day of vengeance on the first line, and then on the second line we have a year of restitution. Well, this word restitution here, it comes from the same root as shalom. Here it is shilum, and it has a distinct legal feel to it. It's about judgment before a tribunal. That's why I translate it as the case of Zion, to try and give it that legal feel. That word also is a word that is closely tied to legalism, a dispute before a tribunal. But this is a matter of making whole the wrongs that were done to Zion. And so that's why that word there, shilum, is there, is to make whole, to repay, to bring justice for what was done to Zion. Here we get to the heart of the matter. Edom was not really responsible for the destruction of Zion. Not really. In a time after Isaiah, they would betray her and assist the Babylonians, but they were never more than a hanger-on. They never wielded any real power. The harsh judgment that is here in this chapter chooses them for its example, not because they were the main aggressor, but because they failed to resist the forces of evil. They instead rode along with it and found ways to profit off of it, to make a buck out of it. They kind of approach it with, why bring trouble on ourselves helping Zion? We aren't the ones that are, being targeted here. We aren't the ones that are demanding Zion's destruction. But we don't mind picking their corpses clean afterwards. Isaiah has singled out this secondary villain as the most deserving of destruction. Now, we mentioned here that her dust will become sulfur, or brimstone is the other word that's commonly used for this. They're the same thing. And that we'll have burning pitch running through where her streams or her wadis were. It gives her this idea of an extremely hellish landscape, fire and brimstone. And the rivers turning into this burning pitch. We started with imagery around vines and fig trees and lambs and goats. Now, granted, the vines and the fig trees were withering and dying, and the lambs and goats were getting slaughtered, but they were there, and so we've moved from a land that supported vines and fig trees and lambs and goats, and we have now moved on to a land that is burning brimstone and pitch where the rivers used to be. It is completely devoid of life. It has all of its people slaughtered, all of its animals slaughtered, and it is now a hellish landscape. But it gets worse. Night and day it shall not be quenched. Its smoke shall go up forever. From generation to generation it shall lie waste. None shall pass through it forever and ever. But the hawk and the porcupine shall possess her. The ibis and the raven shall make camp in her. So we have three different idioms here that kind of mean forever in verse 10. We have forever, la'olam, in the first bit here, and then we have generation to generation, another common Hebrew phrase for something that will last forever, and then we end it off with forever and ever, using a different word for forever. So we have three different Hebrew idioms here of forever. It's trying to really emphasize here that this is done forever. And because this cataclysm seems to be worldwide, it's hard to put this in terms of just the region of Edom. The very skies and the stars have rotted away at this point. So this sounds like worldwide destruction. There's simply no recovering from it. And then we start getting into what is going to live there. And we start listing a whole bunch of animals. This verse and all the verses on through about verse 15, I think it is, the only animals that can be identified confidently are the jackals and the ostriches. Everything else, we're not sure what kind of animals these really were. And I'll put up a chart of all the animals over here so you can see what they all are. We don't really know what they were, but we start here with translated as the hawk and the porcupine here. The first one is the ka'at. It refers to some type of bird. It shows up in Leviticus 11:18 and Deuteronomy 14:17. And he was typically found near ruins. We see that in Zephaniah 2:14. And then the next one is the kipod, which may refer to another type of bird. Sometimes it's translated as hoot owl or screech owl or ravens. But some have suggested it may be a rodent. And the porcupine and the hedgehog are various guesses at what this animal was here, this kipod. Then we have here the next thing here, the ibis and the raven. The Hebrew here has the yonshof and the orev. The yonshof is maybe an owl. It shows up in Leviticus 11:17, Deuteronomy 14:16. And here, but the Septuagint actually translates this word as an ibis, which I kind of liked. I like ibises. Or is it pronounced ibis? I actually don't know. But, the bird with a curved beak. You see it a lot in Egyptian hieroglyphs. But the Septuagint translates this as an ibis, and it might just be a guess. It might be interestingly correct too, who knows. But we don't really know what a Yonshuf is. And Orev probably is a raven. There are a couple of other possibilities. One is it might not be an animal at all. It might actually mean the word Arab, which would dwell there as a wanderer or whatever. Unlikely. It's probably the bird, given the context and given that everything else around it is an animal. It's probably a raven. But these are also animals that are thought of as inhabiting wastelands or destructed areas. They're not civilized animals, and they're going to take up camp there. And then to make it more interesting here, we use this very interesting phrase here: he shall stretch the line of chaos over it and the plumb line of emptiness. Well, there are interesting words going on here. First, we have the word for line, which is the Hebrew word kav, and this is a measuring line, usually for horizontal measurements, like a level, and you would also use it for measuring out inheritances or, and of course, building architecture. And so we have here the idea of making a level line here. He's going to stretch out this line of chaos over it. The word for chaos is Tohu, which goes to Genesis 1 verse 2, that before God started creating, the earth was Tohu. It was chaos. Now, the other word that was there in Genesis 1:2 was Vohu. And that word is the word that's translated as emptiness here. And so we have here the idea that the items of construction, the level line, the kav, and the stone line, which is what the plumb line is. It's a line with a stone on it that could show you properly what a vertical was. And Isaiah has used these symbols before when he talked about making a perfect stone for the builders. He's now using these symbols of construction for the deconstruction, the reversal of creation. And so we are returning back to Tohu and Vohu, chaos, emptiness. Now the words rhyme. They are the first rhyme in the Bible. And it's interesting because the second word, Vohu, we actually don't even know what that word really means. It only shows up in 3 places. It shows up in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and it shows up in Jeremiah 4:23, which is clearly quoting Genesis, and it shows up here. Every time that it shows up, it is always combined with Tohu. Robert Alters believes, and I agree with him, that it's just a made-up word to rhyme with Tohu. That just for emphasis, they wanted to say the earth was wasted schmasted. They just were using a rhyming word to emphasize how chaotic it was. Robert Alter does, in his translation, translates it as welter and waste to try and get the idea across. But the word Vohu doesn't look like it's really a real word at all. It was just simply made up to rhyme with Tohu to emphasize the situation. And so Genesis 1:2 tells us that before creation, the world was Tohu and Vohu. And this verse is telling us that they're going to use the tools of construction, the level and the plumb line, to bring things back to Tohu and Vohu. Just unorganized matter in a chaotic state before creation. And so we have a complete reversal of creation here as the stars rot away and the heaven rolls up like a scroll. There is in this just everything about creation is being undone. So very difficult, dramatic thing here. Going on to verse 12. Verse 12 starts off with this line, "It's nobles." And it seems to be missing something. And there's it's like the line just got lost. Probably it would have something like its nobles are no more or something like that, which would match the two lines after it. But it's missing. Now, the Septuagint does actually fill in its nobles are nothing. And so whatever copy the Septuagint was made from does seem to have that missing line in it. But our copy seems like it lost half of its line here. So we have its nobles. Then we have, there is no one there to call it a kingdom, and all its princes shall be nothing. Thorns shall grow over its strongholds, thorns, nettles, and thistles in its fortresses. It shall be the haunt of jackals, a courtyard for the daughters of ostriches. So we have here the idea that all the fancy people, all the royals, all the nobles, the princes, there's nobody there that's going to call this a kingdom anymore. It's just wasted. All the leadership is destroyed, and we have its once powerful strongholds that are being grown over with thorns and nettles and thistles. We've talked before about the imagery of the weeds, the noxious thorns and briars in Isaiah, and he uses several words for these. This is another one of those verses that seems to use that same imagery, that after the destruction here, these thorns and nettles and so forth are taking over what was once the world. And we have two of our most certain animals over here, the jackals and the ostriches. Ostriches, for some odd reason, are always referred to as daughters of ostriches. Most translations just kind of hide that. I find it kind of interesting, so I made sure that it said it in here. But yes, they're always the daughters of ostriches. I don't know why. But every time we see it, it's always daughters of. The word here translated as courtyard, the Masoretic Text has the word chatzir, which means grass. And a grass for daughters of ostriches isn't right. Almost everybody agrees that that's not the right meaning for this word here. The general thing that most people amend it to is chatzer, and the Qumran scroll of 1Q Isaiah A supports that. It also has the spelling there, chatzer, and the difference is just one letter, a small letter called yod, is different between them. But that's generally considered a good emendation there, and that word means a courtyard. There are a couple of places that will do it as like a dwelling place or something like that. But the idea is a courtyard where courtyards were often places where these nobles would live. You were important to your king. You had a courtyard where you'd go out for a walk in your garden or whatever. But instead, we've got that their strongholds and their fortresses, the places that would often have the courtyard here, they're going to be inhabited by jackals and ostriches. Apparently ostriches are kind of mean. I've never really personally interacted with one. I kind of want to. But apparently they're kind of mean, and they were thought of as, again, these animals of the wastelands. You didn't want to be around them. And they certainly weren't civilized animals. And so we're going to have these wild dogs, these jackals, and we're going to have these ostriches, and they're going to be hanging out in the courtyards where the royalty used to hang out. And so we're still very much, it seems, in the zoological nature of animals here at this point. Animals of the wastes and the wilderness that are going to come in and take over where Edom was. But there's more coming. Verse 14. And demons shall meet with goblins. The satyr shall cry to his fellow, there Lilith settles and finds for herself a resting place. So the word here for demons and goblins actually rhyme. And there are some that try to put these words, again, as animals. I don't think they are. I think these are intended to be mythological beasts. And the mention of the demon Lilith is quite fascinating here as we sort of escalate to her. And we've had this word for goblins. We discussed it back in chapter 13, verse 22. And that was according to the scholar E.Y. Kutcher, that felt that this word actually meant goblins, which, as a fan of Lord of the Rings, I'm fully in favor of. But we have here the idea of these demons and goblins are meeting with each other. And there are satyrs there, goat demons. And they are crying to their fellow, their friend. Sometimes the translations say mate. This really is more of the word for friend, a neighbor. But they're calling to each other. There are these satyrs and these demons and these goblins. They are the ones who live there. They are fierce, dangerous creatures that live in waste places, and it seems that they are now inhabiting what was once the domain of kings and nobles. And then we have Lilith. There are people that say that Lilith is not necessarily a demon, but that it is some kind of a bird. The nightjar or goatsucker bird is one that is put out there. The screech owl is put out there by some. I think the majority opinion now is that this was a demon that it was connected with sexual relationships. It was an incubus, succubus. That's a fairly well believed thing. And she did have bird-like features. And there is a very popular relief that we believe is her, where she has very bird-like features and she is surrounded by owls. And that may be what we're talking about here when we talk about Lilith. Now, she took on a whole new life of her own in post-biblical times. She became the first wife of Adam, and he has all sorts of ex-wife problems, apparently. She became a demon that steals children and causes stillbirths and all that. It's very unclear how much of that goes back to the ancient world and how much of that was just a lot of later developments and layers upon her. I think it's pretty likely that she was a demon or demoness of some kind that was feared. She probably had a very sexual aspect to her. She probably was looked upon as somebody that was sort of anti-fertility, the one that would cause life to be lost. And she seems to be the escalation point here, that we go from demons and goblins to satyrs, then to finally Lilith herself. If it is a bird, the nightjar is itself a terrifying looking bird. So, take of that what you will. We have here in verse 15, there the owl nests and lays and hatches and gathers her young in her shadow. Okay, the word here for owl is kipos, and it only shows up here. We really don't know what it means. Something is there that is nesting and laying eggs and hatching them and gathering her young together. Often a more maternal kind of imagery here, but here it is some sort of terrible, fierce creature that you don't want to be around. Indeed, there the hawks are gathered, each one with her fellow. Seek and read from the book of the Lord. Not one of these shall be missing. None shall be without her fellow. Now again, this word here I don't believe is intended to be mate, because fellow is feminine, as is the thing calling out to it. I think fellow is a fellow or friend is a better translation here. But we have whatever hawks are here, again, an uncertain word, and they are going to be communicating with each other, and it tells you to seek and read from the book of the Lord. What is the book of the Lord? It's a bit of a mystery. Apparently, it has some information about these creatures, and perhaps we are referencing again back to Isaiah's sealed book that he said was going to come forward. Maybe this is his writings that he sealed up, and this is telling us to go look at that, because that is the thing that predicts this. That would meet very much with Isaiah's own description of the book and why it was sealed. So maybe that's what we're talking about here when we say seek and read from the book of the Lord. There's some book out there that they are referring us to read. It's not very clear what it is. How do we continue on here? For the mouth of the Lord has commanded, and his spirit has gathered them. Now, the Hebrew text reads literally here, for a mouth he has commanded. Now, again, we go to the Qumran, 1Q Isaiah A scroll, and also a couple of medieval manuscripts have here, his mouth has commanded, rather than just a mouth has commanded. And a few other medieval manuscripts read, mouth of the Lord has commanded. And so it seems like that is probably the correct reading here. Not that a mouth has commanded, but that either his mouth, meaning the Lord, or perhaps actually having the word Lord there, is the correct reading, that the mouth of the Lord has commanded. But that this, turning this place into the hellish landscape that it is at the direct command of the Lord. And that it is his spirit that has brought all these horrible things there to that place. And we continue with this interesting imagery here. He has cast the lot for them. His hand has portioned it out to them with the line. Okay. We've got here now this interesting, some people would say sarcastic line here, that we're dividing up inheritances for these demons as though they were humans. He is casting the die, or casting the lot for them. This is a gorel. He's the verb here is literally to let fall the die, and he's got a gorel, which we believe is a small stone with markings on it, basically a die that he rolls for them here. And this was a thing that was done when you were trying to divide up the land fairly, is that you cast lots over it. And so we have God here has cast the lot for them, and his very own hand here has measured it out with the line. This is that same word that we had a moment ago when we said that the line and the plumb line were going to be used for them. He has it again here, that he's measuring out to them where everybody's property is, so everybody gets their own special spot in hell here that is designated to them by the Lord. And we have here a promise that seems to echo the promise that was given to the Israelites. For they shall possess it forever. From generation to generation they shall dwell in it. And this reflects back our three different words for forever. We only have two of them here at the end. But the idea that this is their land forever. They possess it. And this is chapter 34. It's a bleak chapter. It's a brutal chapter. But it's setting it up for what follows in 35. Because that's a complete opposite of this. We're going to talk about what's going to happen to Zion. So we ended here with this apocalyptic chapter. The whole world is going to be destroyed and handed over to demons with fire and brimstone and complete destruction and so much blood that the mountains will melt. Tell me what about that is your favorite part in the comments. Until then, like and subscribe. I will see you in the next one. Shalom.